All right. Greetings, everyone. Uh, let us open with an acknowledgement of territory. An acknowledgement of territory is most meaningful when it is part of a larger commitment to right relations. So, I'm going to invite you, first of all, to in your own heart, in your own space. You can speak it out loud if you wish, remaining muted. Speak it out into the space where you are to name and acknowledge the indigenous nations whose traditional territory you are on. And any treaties or proclamations that are a part of the relationships in the land where you are. And I'm going to invite you to think of now of one action that you are doing or plan to take or can take to seek healing and right relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in the land where you are. And you can jot that down, put it in wherever you keep notes. If you wish, you can put a word or two of that into the chat. And let that prayerful reflection be our acknowledgement of territory. And to pray, let us pause and breathe and remind yourself that you are in the presence of God, a love that is so powerful that this love can infuse its presence into any pain, any grief, any struggle. This love, this God doesn't erase the pain or the grief or the struggle, but brings healing presence in the midst of our lives. So let us invite this love to be at the center of our gathering. The source of this love we know as Creator. The presence of this love in our midst we know as Jesus, the Christ. The power of this love we know as the Holy Spirit. And so turning to this great love, we pray, be present and active for us. As we move on the path of undoing racism in ourselves and in our church and in our communities, be with us. When we are unsure of the way, guide us. When we fall asleep to the fullness of our own abilities, awaken us. When we find ourselves stuck in ways that do not serve your love, liberate us. When we slip up again in ways that harm and don't heal, forgive us. When the road seems long and we become weary, strengthen us. Oh, great God, we know you are with us, and so grateful for your presence. With faithful and hopeful hearts, we offer our prayer to you, Creator, Christ, and Spirit one. Amen. And just a reminder that Diane Blanchard and I'm Therese Samuel, are present for pastoral support during this time. So I've just put our phone numbers. You can phone or text either one of us if you need to reach out. And I turn it over to Alcris and John. Or do you want me to do the respect guidelines now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So once again, we ground ourselves and our community in the respectful communication guidelines. I will remind us of them. R is to take responsibility for what you say and feel without blaming others. E is to use empathetic listening. S is to be sensitive to differences in communication styles. P is to ponder what you hear and feel before you speak. E is to examine your own assumptions and perceptions. C is to keep confidentiality. And T is to trust ambiguity, because we are not here to debate who is right and who is wrong. And last week we added one, I'm going to call them respect O guidelines. We added the ouch. And that is an invitation that if something has been said that is painful for you, we invite you to take that risk and speak up if you feel safe to do so. And know that you can always call one of the pastoral support people. And as a reflection for you, I'm going to invite you to oops, sorry, I went too far. To notice which of the respect plus O guidelines will be most difficult for you today. And I'm going to go back to those. And if you wish, you can type that into the chat. We can give an opportunity for one person to, if you'd like to speak, to unmute and briefly speak to that. But otherwise, give you a chance to type it into the chat. Which one will be most difficult for you today, at this moment?
I think for me, my name is Shelley. Right now, I'm going through sort of be sensitive to differences in communication style. So yesterday I was at Costco and I needed some. Am I okay to speak?
Yes, really brief, if it's a really brief story.
Well, it's not like 20 minutes, but there is some lead up to it. So anyway, I was in line to get some assistance on something, and I was standing behind a person who was being served, and then this man walked up, and he walked right up to the counter, and someone came over and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Wait a minute, I was here." And so then he got really upset, and he said, "What are you doing butting in like that?" And I said, "Well, I was here before you." And then his response was, "Go back to the country you came from." And it was, I said, "This is my country." And the fact is, I was born in Canada. So maybe I don't look like him, but I was born in Canada. So, people deal with these things every day, right? And this is all part of anti-racism. So that's why I'm telling you. I hope that was fast enough for you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. And thank you for sharing. And yes, that is why we are here. So for the respect guidelines, if we can, actually, I'm going to take a moment just for a breath to receive and absorb the sharing that Shelley has offered us, and pray that we can wrap in the grace of the Spirit's presence all of the stories and struggles that we bring to this work. And with the respect guidelines, including ouch, and that would have been a time, right, to say ouch if it was safe enough. That story that Shelley shared. If you notice, that we're not using these guidelines, we're here to create a space together. So we invite you to name that and say, "I notice the conversation we're having doesn't seem to be upholding the respect and O guidelines. I wonder if we could revisit them." So we all create this space together and hold one another accountable in the space. So I'm going to ask if we have agreement to the respect guidelines for our time together, respect and O guidelines for our time together. And if so, if you can give a thumbs up, if your camera's off, just a thumbs up. If it's on, you can do it manually. Great. Thank you. All right. It looks like we've got agreement from everybody. So now I will stop the share and turn it over to co-facilitators, John and Alcris.
Okay, thank you. So welcome back everyone to our second session. And yeah, Alcris and I are the co-facilitators for this session as well. I have to say though that I'm in my work for the region, I was in part of inviting Alcris to be with us to help us as a region to do this work better. And so I'm here to learn as well as to co-facilitate. And so I'm welcome you all into this space where we can learn together. So last time our focus really was on the personal, and the image we had was to sit up at the table with our elbows. And there were a few concepts that we introduced as well as part of that discussion, focusing on the personal. If you remember, there was that image of the blue zone, where you're feeling safe, but maybe not as comfortable as you otherwise would be. And so somewhere in between the panic zone and the zone of too comfort zone, there's that blue zone where there's actually opportunity for sharing and growth. Another image that we had was the staircase of oppression. So on the lower end of the staircase was what were some of those? The prejudice and I think it was the lowest one was the stereotypes, and then it got went on from there, and sort of a movement from the personal to the systemic. We talked a little bit about racism and some basic concepts. So moving to a deeper understanding of racism, and not just as an incident that happened in 1973 of someone being hostile to someone, but that it's something that's an ongoing thing, and that it's deep within our culture and within our systems, and in the air that we breathe. So a kind of a deeper understanding of racism. We talked a little bit about making visible the invisible. So we had that image of the iceberg, which was on the surface, but then going underneath the surface is all those deeper things that aren't necessarily visible. And there was also the verbs that we shared, the anti-racist verbs. And I'm just wondering, do you remember some of those? We could maybe even just do that exercise again and just put into the chat some of the verbs that you remember from last time that we identified as verbs related to anti-racism work.
Michelle, could we, hi everybody, could we have the slide is at the beginning of the stairway of oppression, as people remember the verbs?
Oh yeah, there's the comfort zone.
This one, here. Yes. There is a little arrow on each one of the steps. Yes, John is asking you to remember the verbs. Think what verb can you apply to believe. We can, for example, interrogate our beliefs. So we will stop stereotypes. As who was said, just said about Peggy, about speaking, we can interrupt prejudices by speaking, by naming. So that will contest, okay, what values are holding my prejudices? Any other? Be curious, yes. And especially, you know, this series is a view, a 360 view. And as we get into that viewing mode, we need to be curious and ask questions and raise questions. And that's an anti-racist tool. And when pondering is always hard for me because I get too excited. Yes. Yes. Learn. Do you have any more verbs, John?
Well, the one I remember was disrupt.
Disrupt. Yes. Yes. In that disruption, go back to that zone that we just saw the blue zone. Today, like, last week, we called it the learning zone because that's where growth happens, when we are not too comfortable and not too in panic that we totally shut up ourselves. But this blue zone for today, we're going to start calling it the zone of disequilibrium, the zone of uncomfort. So can we move again to the next one, Michelle? Thank you. And this is the panic. So we need to be in the blue one. But when we are facing racism or doing anti-racism, we are in the blue zone. Disequilibrium is something that we don't like, that we don't want to happen, or there is something that is happening continuously and we want to disrupt that. Can we move, please, to the next one? So I made a few changes here. We said that everything starts very naively with stereotypes and they become prejudices when this belief turn into values, and the values produce unconscious actions that we know as bias. And when we enact that, our bias, we discriminate against, and that's an action. But when systems and structures normalize all this, it becomes racism or any ism, heterosexism, ableism, when it is normal to discriminate any type of identity. And I added here, I said last week that it was the white supremacy culture, and we don't use white supremacy as thinking on the Ku Klux Klan or something really outrageous. No, it is white supremacy because white culture establishing the normalcy, what is accepted, you know, in a way that sustains all of that, even with the best intentions. So that's why we need to interrogate, to name, to interrupt, to disrupt, to dismantle when we go to systemic. I wrote there, white supremacy culture normalizes, validates. For example, something as simple as policies for a newcomer that needs to have Canadian experience. It must be the most qualified person for a job, even an entry job, but that's a wall for many that they don't have Canadian experience, but they are not allowed to have Canadian experience. So, that's the way I heard one time in Emmanuel College. At Emmanuel College, there was a professor visiting us, and he said, you maybe are not racist, but you allow your policies to be racist for you. And that really got to my mind. So going back to the white supremacy validates, dictates, and makes itself invisible. And that's why John said, that's the air we breathe. And in a way, it's saying, well, this is what it is. This is how we do things, and it's unquestionable. So this is a little a figure that will help us to unpack racism, because sometimes things like what Shelley described yesterday, or any form of racism, feel like we may feel disappointed that something happened. We may feel frustrated because we don't know what to do, or when it happens in our organizations or places of work, or even in the church, we feel, well, this is too big for me. But the idea of having this little drawing here is to help us to see, okay, everything has a beginning, and I can use my verbs. And here, that's where we're going to be talking about today, is the oppression, the big one, the systemic, but we have personal power to do the first four. For the last one, for racism, when it's structural, we don't have personal power. Like, I cannot say, well, I'm going to stop racism in the federal government. That's too big for me. But there are some tools that we could use to implement and to do something at the systemic level, and we will be talking today about that. Next slide, please. Okay, that's you, all of you. Next slide. Okay, yeah, no, the other one, the one in the back. I have to ask you a few questions first. We're here. No, we are in the other one, the screen. We're, no, the next one. Okay. Okay. Today we're going from the personal to the systemic. Still, the main topic is a 360 view of the United Church. That's our context. And we are here because in any way or other, we are connected to the church. And I believe that you love the church as I do too, and we care. And that's, we are here. That's my assumption. But I want you to think and write in the chat in one word, what is your context? Very quickly, just one word, because now we're moving to our immediate context. So you could say congregation, theological school, region, or minister, or whatever, just one word. Congregation. Hi, Phyllis. Congregation. Region. Yeah, right there. Ministry, congregation. Okay. So we examined ourselves, our iceberg last week, our beliefs, or where were we located, because we were going to have a view of the United Church. Now we're going to be situated in that context, in the context of your retreat center. Oh, I'm also in a retreat center right now. In a congregation or region or wherever you are. And I'm going to invite you to describe write in a paper. I don't want you to share that with anybody. That's for you. What do you see in your context? And we are isolating race. It could be discrimination in another area, but I just want you to think for this afternoon in terms of race. So what do you see? And because of confidentiality and, and for you to focus on your context, let's do that. What do you see with your bare eye?
Excuse me, do you mean what do you see just in your everyday life or in our congregation or?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear better.
No,
well,
don't worry. Thank you for the question. We're talking about our immediate context in the United Church. So if your context is a congregation, just think about it. Or if it is a region.
okay.
Okay.
And we just write it down. We don't put it in the chat.
Yeah, no, just write it down for yourself. We're going to be using that. And very specifically, like something that reminds you, something that you have noticed. A couple of seconds so we can move to the breakout rooms. Let us move to breakout rooms. Let me explain you first. And you will be a fly on the wall for this part, a fly on the wall. A fly on the wall is not participating, it's just there, barely noticed, but has access to what is happening in the room. So again, still thinking about your context. So first, name some differences between racial group identities. So you can say, well, I noticed that people from the dominant culture, this, and I noticed that racialized people, that. How people racialized and dominant participate in the context. Do you notice any differences? This is, you're just a fly on the wall. It is very superficial, but it gives you access to take a look. And if you think, for example, in terms of representation and participation, what do you see? You see people who are, if you're thinking in a congregation, that racialized minorities are just sitting on the pews. Do you see, I don't know, maybe their aspects of their cultures are represented or not? I don't know, every congregation is different. So, but it's implementing a few tools for you to observe. Remember that anti-racism is making visible what is invisible. And sometimes it's not that invisible, but we are used not to see it. The second question for the breakout room is you position on a balcony. A balcony is a position of authority, so you're looking down to what is happening, but from a specific position. A fly didn't have any power or authority, but now you are standing on the balcony. So think about how your authority or role impacts the presence of racism in your context. Let's do this too for now. And could we break out? Did you have any question before we break? Could we break down in groups of 2? Yeah, in pairs, so we can.
And if I can just offer one thing for when you're in the breakout groups, to please, if at all possible, have your cameras turned on so that you are present for one another in a more full way.
Mhm. And could we see the next slide so people can take a picture to this one too? Yeah, here are the questions. In what ways your authority or role impacts the presence of racism in your context? Remember that we're moving from the personal, but now to the systemic. Do you derail or detour or deny that? Or good intentions and bad impact? Think about leadership from the balcony.
Okay,
And we'll take 10 minutes to do this.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. So you're going to be a fly in the wall and you're going to stand on the balcony and see what you observe in your own context. You can share with your partner, but remember confidentiality and don't say something that you don't want to say.
Okay, the rooms are ready, Alcris. Shall I open them now?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's go.
Could we have one fly to share with us what they could see from the wall, and one person from the balcony to share? Only one and one, so we get the idea. We're going to use this a little bit later. Okay.
Who would like to share? It doesn't look like I have any willing
No,
volunteers.
no flies.
Alcris. Oh, I do have a hand
Jennifer.
up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, like, I looked at it from the point of view of the regional council, and I was sharing in my breakout room that to me, it looked like there was full participation of all the different racial groups, and I was feeling like really proud of that. And then someone in my breakout room pointed out just a wondering about how much like how much different racial groups might be working to fit into the system as it is.
Yeah.
To enable them to participate fully, like how much work were they doing as opposed to the dominant culture, and how easily they could just participate, and just to wonder about that. And I thought that was really a really valuable thing to wonder about.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. It is that's true. You know, it takes an amount of courage and pacing yourself and all of that to participate, especially because of different cultural differences. Not all cultures have the entitlement to go to the microphone and speak their minds. When you are in a racial minority group, you question yourself about, well, what about what about my friends who are white? You know, if I say this, they will feel hurt. Like, you question your loyalty, you question the place you have in the system. There are many forces, but it is very encouraging at the same time to see that they feel safe enough, at least, to try participating. Yeah. So, yeah, hold that thought, because we're going to do an exercise about that. Okay. What about somebody from the balcony? What did you notice about how role and authority may play a role or not in racism? Or how do you see that enacted by denial? There is no problem, or derailing, well, but there is something worse in the South, or something that you shared in your room. Share with us. Diane, you have your hand raised.
I do. And I'm
Okay.
just thinking about both on a personal level with family as well as in congregation. I do see this inability to see white power that we have. And I'm part of a small group at church. Wait, is this racist? And I shared in the group, and I think this is it isn't just to say you're not racist, because you have to recognize that whether you are acting racist in a situation or not, as a white person, for me, you don't know all the time. You don't know when you are being it. And you have to make it a goal to be anti-racist. And my thing is, I have really good intentions. So when I look at this thing with all the things where you can have, how does your role impact? I think I have good intentions, but I'm pretty sure I derail sometimes with my good intentions. That's sharing personally, and maybe that's not what you wanted, but anyhow.
I think you said so many good things. about anti-racism. One, you're acknowledging your racial identity, and that's huge. You know, that's something that you cannot change. Many people feel ashamed when they realize, oh, I'm a white person and I have all this power, and you know that. No, it's just to embrace who you are, embrace the fact that all of us, including racialized people, we're not going to get it right all the time. This is a lifelong learning process and unlearning, because there's so many things that we thought they were okay because they have been normalized by the culture that we don't know. That is not, that's why we need to educate ourselves and explore and use these tools. You know, what these tools are doing is to get, is like when I got the cataract surgery, you know, suddenly I could see how dirty was my kitchen floor. What? You know, it's like using a new set of lens that will help you. You will exercise your vision to see what it has been visible all the time, but nobody cares because it's normal. That's the way it is. So looking at your context from different perspectives helps you to see better and to analyze. And now we're going to move into how to use this. You said something else that I thought it was important, but yeah, so starting to see that happens not only in your immediate context in the church, even though with good intentions, and how that happens as well in our families every day. Like good intentions, for example, when in the church we invite a racialized person to be part of a committee or to be part of the board, and we feel, well, we're getting there, you know. We don't realize that tokenism, to have that person as a token to check the box and say, well, we have diversity, racial diversity now in the board. If we stop there, there is good intention, but bad impact. Why is that? Because we're putting on the person's shoulders the load that this person is representing all the voices, all the experiences of the race. And if it's somebody from Africa, Africa is a continent, it's not a city, it's not a village. All the cultural diversity. And the same with somebody from Latin America, Asia, you know. So, but as white people don't think, you know, I'm representing everybody from Winnipeg or all the descendants of all the Scottish descendants. No, as white people, you know, being individuals, being aware of the contributions they're making, of their experience, and don't feel that anxiety and that misrepresented expectation. So that is a huge learning. So that means that we're not inviting anybody else. No, it means that the expectations will change, and this person will be able to feel free to say, for example, I am a racial minority person, so I, Alcris, feel free to contribute from my experience, from my life, from my studies, from my job, without feeling that I'm representing all Venezuelans and not all South and Central Americans, all the Spanish-speaking population in the world, you know, because that's the unspoken assumption. So exercises like this help you to see the patterns and interrupt practices that maybe are considered good. That's the intention, but the impact is, and just interrupting something like that or questioning, interrogating is an active anti-racist practice. So thank you so much. We're moving to another perspective now. Could we see the next slide?
Oh, okay. And all.
That's you.
Okay, if you were now one of this crowd, locate yourself in both racial identities and try to imagine feelings: acceptance, fulfillment, welcomed, accepted, anxious, isolated, happy to be there on the pew or at work. In a
For
pew,
example,
yeah.
if you are in a pew or on a pew or at the pew.
Yeah, are you the recipient of the ministry? Do you see yourself, aspects of your culture? Oh, the top of the iceberg, represented there. If there was an office, if it was an office or a unit, what type of work do you do? What level of authority, decision making do you have? What do you notice in the relationships? Segregated? Who interacts with who?
I went to a congregation 2 weeks ago, and they are the most welcoming congregation that I've been at. And at the coffee time, there were tables, and in one table there were 3 racialized minorities there, including me, and everybody else on the other tables. So these are the things to notice. You know, it's not that they're racist and they're mean. No, maybe they don't have the tools to engage with somebody that is looks different. Maybe they don't have they haven't had the surgery, the cataract surgery, to see that these people feel isolated or segregated. I have been asked in all my years in the United Church, oh, is this when they get to know me, oh, this is your first Sunday here? No, I've been a member for 10 years, you know, and that happens to many racialized people. So that's why John is asking you to put yourself, when you go to church, in the shoes of one person that is racialized, and put yourself in the shoes that one person that is white. Are they really happy to go to church? And do they feel that if they have an announcement, they can just stand up and say it? Do they have to think 3,000 times before speaking? Are they anxious? You know, it's just even at the, we are at the ground level. We have been up on the wall, we have been on the balcony, and now we are on the ground. Do you have one person with a comment? Because we have to, unfortunately, to move on. One person?
I have my audio on, and so I think that's a good point to put yourself in the shoes of a racialized person. So it's sort of the same when I was a kid. My parents were lay preachers, and they were always saying, now, if you notice somebody different at church, they could be white or wherever, but they aren't normally a part of our congregation. It's in the when you live in a tourist area, you often have people come. It used to have, still do in the summertime. You have people come, so make them feel welcome. And I think that applies across the board. It applies to
Mhm.
everybody,
Yes.
regardless of race or the stranger. And so I've had people say to me, I decided to join your church because your parents made me feel welcome. And this was after when they kind of had retired from as activist church life. But even when they were active, they tried to do that, but they're busy. They were lay preachers, and but when they retired, they made that their goal. Dad would write down, he'd get anybody different background, didn't matter. Anybody he noticed new in church on Sunday that he hadn't seen before, he had a little booklet in his pocket, and he wrote down their name, and he had a great memory for faces and everything, and names. And so the next summer when they came, he was right over to welcome them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the
That is what it
I
takes.
think that's something that can extend across. It's just it's a blanket invitation to all. But do we welcome racialized people as well as we welcome white people? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Your parents moved from the panic zone or from the comfort zone to the blue zone, to be uncomfortable and meet with the stranger. And I've been thinking that exactly, it looks like you studied. No, I'm just joking. That anti-racism, is just hospitality.
Yes.
Hospitality to welcome one another. It's not that white people are going to welcome, no, it's one another, because we are called to be in relationships of mutuality, pray for one another, and lift your loads of one another, confess to one another, help one another. So it's just that.
Yes. So
Hospitality.
that I think is part of the Christian philosophy. So we lived on a farm on a rural road in Bruce County, and we entertained people from around the world on our because my parents were so outgoing and involved in the church, and we had people from Central America, people from India. Their one friend, she was the old term missionary. I don't know whether you've heard of her or not, Helen Houston. She was a friend of Mom and Dad. And she would come the odd time, but so we'd hear her stories about Nepal. And so I think we just have to, and a hired man that used to come to us work on our farm as a teenager, he married a lady from India, and she said she came up to the farm when she first came to Canada, and she said, I felt the most welcome. They were living in Toronto, and she says, I have felt the most welcome here that I have felt since I've come to Canada.
Wow.
And that was during her first year.
Yeah.
So I think that's just my thought is.
Yeah. I love that you told that story, because that's something that everybody can relate to and they can apply. And a change in perspective can help us to see diversity from a different perspective, not as a problem that we have to endure. We have to welcome them because we have to do the right thing. We don't have to be racist. No. If we see diversity as an opportunity, as a wealth, as, welcoming one another and embodying, our life in the way of Jesus. So this, I'm going to, I'm sorry to move from here, but I thank you a lot, and for that story. Let's go to the next slide. I want to introduce you to two tools before our time ends. That is going to be very short, very soon. Last week, we saw this iceberg, and here there are stories, our beliefs, the patterns of thinking, what is unconscious in us. And this week, I want you to look at the other iceberg, that it is, yeah. It is a tool by Peter Seger, I think. And he invites us to see what is underneath of what you see. You know, on top of the iceberg is what is visible, what we have talked about, but underneath, we could identify what patterns, what structures, and what beliefs. If we notice, patterns are closer to the surface. You're looking at, for example, people in the office, we have only people of color doing clerical work. And that's a pattern that happens most of the time. So we move to see structures. What structures support this pattern? Okay, the policies we have are, a Canadian experience, policies that put like a glass ceiling for people to advance, or there is like the, I don't know, other policies. And then, okay, and where are these structures based on? And we go to the deeper aspect of culture. And that's the beliefs we have that, for example, people like us have more credibility, like our education system is better, like, we don't, we cannot not trust, like, for example, a person with an accent is not as smart as a person that has a Canadian accent, like all this. But these three words or categories are key for you when you examine what is happening, in systems, in your context. So use it this week to analyze, this is what I see on top of the surface. For example, what Shirley told us about go back to your country. Okay, is that a pattern? That's called microaggressions. And this is something that didn't happen in 1930, 76, and now when Shirley experienced that, and I'm sorry that you experienced that, is something that people of color experience lots of, every day, there are microaggressions. Could we move to the next slide, please? So we're going to move to, when we're doing anti-racism work, sometimes we feel, okay, we have been doing this, like we have our anti-racist policy since the year 2000 for the United Church. And sometimes we feel, especially if you are committed to this, things are not advancing. Yeah, Chile, you are totally right. Yeah, now we are able to see that. What I meant is not something that happens, once in a blue moon, but it's more common than we know for racialized people. So what I want to call your attention now is to this concept of adaptive work, adaptive challenges, and adaptive leadership. Sometimes for racism, to counter racism or interrupt racism or any other ism, we try to apply a technical solution. A technical solution is something that we just to apply something that we know. For example, it is changing the behavior on the top of the surface. And usually it works from the heads of office or authority or top down. If we think about worship, okay, we notice that there is no hymns that people from Asia would relate to. So we're going to include one hymn. That's a technical solution. It's a one-time thing. We're not thinking about any deeper change, and it's taken by the minister, the decision, or the worship committee. It's not that it's bad, it's good, but it continues to happen. For example, if at the same congregation come people from Nigeria or from Venezuela. So you see that there is a lack of representation in our worship services. So that means that there is an adaptive challenge in front of us. What does it mean? That there is the need for a change in minds and hearts. And what's the work in that area? Well, learn new ways, because sometimes we try the same thing over and over and over, and there is no change. And who does the work? In the technical, in fixing the situation, is usually people on the top. But here, the people with the problem become the people with the solution. So it's to invite people of minorities to participate in the situation. What is adaptive? Why? I want to go, Michelle, to the, oh, no, it's not necessary. I have one. Let's go to the next one, please. Adaptive work, you realize that is something that persists over time, that does not get resolved with quick or punctual solutions, and that needs time, persistence, collaboration, and maintain a disequilibrium environment. And racism or anti-racism is in this category, because you're not going to fix things like that with one policy or with one action. Could we move to the next one, please? Here is this area. Adaptive challenge is like the blue zone that we saw at the beginning. And it's the area where we feel the stress. Yes, we're going to have another break room if we have at least. So here is the problem. The technical solution tries to fix the problem. The adaptive approach stays in that area, in this area. That is where the distress and disequilibrium is. It takes more time, and we stay in that zone. If we move to the next slide, here is the difference. For example, in the adaptive work, for example, anti-racism, we don't know how it will look like totally. It's not a clear, specific thing that we will see. We don't know the road.
Yeah.
We're working with people.
Not really. Okay.
It takes new learning. We have to find out what resources we need. We will have unfamiliar roles, competencies that we will need to develop, There is unpredictable, and we need to change to become different. In the technical or problem fix solution, we know the methods. You do the same again, where we will start a committee that does this and that, or we hire a consultant. So the consultant will not stay with us in the blue zone, in the disequilibrium. We will not invite people who are involved, people who are in the minority, or people who have no voice. We don't invite them. We invite a consultant that come, analyze the situation. We go back to our comfort zone, and they do the work for us. As a result, it will be a technical solution, but there is no real change of heart and mind as it happens when we wrestle with the problem. Could we move to the next one? So for leadership in your context, one, these are some tips. Get on the balcony so you're able to see, to analyze what is happening and think about power. See the iceberg and look for patterns, structures, and beliefs, the one that I mentioned. Hold this equilibrium in the uncomfortable place. And that's a role of the leader, to say, okay, this is uncomfortable, but we are here and we're here together. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable because we're going through a transition. We're going to change. We're going to become different. Give work back to people. It means people who are involved, impacted. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that it's the work of racialized people, because racism impacts white people and people of color in different ways, but all are impacted. So give work back to people who are impacted in different ways. And finally, to be curious, ask questions. Because by questions, we challenge assumptions. You know, assumptions are statements or beliefs that we think that that's the way it is. So be curious and protect voices from below, especially people who have no voice in the church or in the region. And these are some principles of that's what I'm talking about. adaptive work and adaptive leadership. Next time, we're going to have a view of the whole church, and we will be using this, but I want you to come back with a list of all things that you have noticed in the United Church. You have about 2 weeks to do that are anti-racist, okay? So what is happening? What has been happening already? Could we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. I wanted to go to breakout rooms for you to explore one of the things you saw from this adaptive perspective. But yeah, we have only 5 minutes. Could we do that in plenary, or
yeah,
John?
There may be some people with questions because you've given us quite a lot to think about, and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have questions or comments, or can use this adaptive, when you hear, oh, this is not working? Sometimes we don't give time to the changes or the process, and we just pull out and start something new, or become so cynicist that
cynical, yeah.
cynical, yes, that we think, okay, there is no way to solve this or to move on. So can we talk to this, or if you have any questions about adaptive
So
work
can
and
we
leadership?
let's end screen sharing. Thank you. Yeah. Any reactions or responses?
I don't want to talk again if somebody else wants to talk, but
Okay.
I have found in my volunteer work, and I'm going to use a non-church example. So when we started, we just decided to, some of us decided to restore our watershed. The practice of, from the settler time of, you were expected to clear the trees. So it went from 95% forested to like 5% over the generations from the 1800s in our watershed. So I was trying to get some expertise because I didn't really know much. And so were the rest of us. And so, when we got you had to start in a certain place in the watershed. You had to do it first, and then you had to do this and do this and do this and do this. And so we said, yeah, but we don't live in that part of the watershed. We can get farmers that with the big machinery, we can get half an acre here or an acre here. Mostly it was half an acre, quarter of an acre. And as we got new people, then we were able to get to that a few years later. But anyway, we got to the same place. But if we had listened to the expertise at the start, I don't think we'd ever got it off the ground because, oh no, you have to do it this way. It's kind of inside the box. And I think I've encountered that different times and I am guilty of having a hard time. I get too discouraged if it's too much of, like you say, hire a consultant. We had an episode of big kerfluffle here over a statue. Some of you might have heard about it, and so a consultant was hired from Toronto, I think it was. And the very same thing, we've got to have a consultant. It's got to be like this and this and this. So I don't know, am I way off track? Is that what you were talking about there?
I'm not saying that hiring a consultant all the time doesn't work.
Well, sometimes it does, but I've been part of hiring many consultants.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is sometimes something makes us uncomfortable or we see that it doesn't work, and instead of staying in the problem and call all those who are impacted and stay there, how do we need to change? We prefer to call or to fix something in a superficial manner so that will not provoke a deep charge change in mind and heart.
Or you just give up, right?
And in this case, we're talking about racism, and that needs a change on heart and mind, because we have seen how it's not something on the surface. It comes from the conversations we hear at the dinner table when we were growing up, programs we watch on TV, all these things are mounting up in our unconscious and provoke, and that is normalized by the air we breathe, and that happens. So what we have been doing today, hopefully, is to get tools to unpack, like when I watch cooking programs, and they are deconstructed, I don't know, Eggs Benedict. So they put all the pieces in a different way. We're deconstructing racism in getting tools that give us personal power to impact the structures. And
Jump in here for a second,
like from last week to have these difficult conversations. We are over 1 minute, and I think we need to stop.
So Alcris, if you could just repeat the assignment that you want people to do,
Yes.
that would be good. And then send us out. And
Yes.
if someone does want to continue talking for a little bit, I can be available online.
Yeah. Next time we will be talking a 360 view of the United Church. But it's not that we're going to do a fix, a technical solution and nothing has been happening. No. So I invite you to make a list, as you have witnessed, anti-racist practices and beliefs happening in our church, because we are celebrating the 100th anniversary and we have had racist actions and beliefs, but we're not staying there. There's so many blind spots, but things are happening and have been happening for years. So if we start by recalling what has been happening in terms of anti-racism, our view for the next workshop will not be so biased or prejudiced. It will be, this is where we are, and we have to celebrate and we have to challenge ourselves as well. So that's what I suggest you to do. And yeah, and I thank you for your patience and your participation.
So I'm sorry, I'm just the 360 view of the church from the time for over the last 100 years, say at our church.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
go back
no,
to
things
pioneer
that
time.
you have witnessed that called your attention, that you noticed, that is to compile a list of things.
Okay. Okay.
Also to say that we're not starting from zero.
So the good and the bad.
The good and the
Yeah.
bad. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but we will be focusing more on the anti-racism, because the racism, we know it.
So good and bad over the last 100 years, focusing on racism and
Anti-racism. Yes.
and what we can do.
Well, John, are you going to stay behind and talk for a few minutes? Because I have some things to say.
Sure. If people, yes, I am detecting that there are some people who want to keep talking, so I can stick around. I don't know if Alcris is able to, but I am able to. But I also know that other people have time limits, and we need to officially end the meeting so that they can get on with their other commitments.
Yes. Could we go very quickly, Michelle, to the prayer slide? So we close reading this together. Let us pray. Thicken my love.
My heart,
Widen
my heart, sharpen my analysis, enliven my praxis, embolden my voice, deepen my rest, lighten my heaviness, toughen my skin, soften my spirit, strengthen my relationships, lengthen my endurance, weaken my ego, awaken my soul, refreshen my vision, hearken to my weary voice, O God. I am your friend and co-conspirator in the struggle for a new world. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you again.
Okay, see you in 2 weeks.
Yes. Hasta la vista.